We come now to our oration today will be delivered by Sean Whelan. Sean is the chairman of the National Graves Association and a great Irishman. Sean Whelan.
Of course, several of the volunteers that Paddy named in the Roll of Honour are buried here in front of us, including Erskine Childers, who's just over here to the left. The history of this country is one of occupation, resistance, suffering, and unimaginable self-sacrifice. Throughout this island are the countless monuments and graves of the men and women who have given their lives for our liberty. 1916 to 1921 was a period of great revolution, as the downtrodden people arose and leaders came forward who lived and breathed the ideals of justice, equality and freedom. Men and women quite willing to lay down their very lives for their fellow man. Then came the counter-revolution, more popularly known as the Civil War, whose 90th anniversary we commemorate here today. On November 17, 1922, the first of those to be executed, Jim Fisher, Peter Cassidy, Richard Toohey and John Gaffney, all aged between 18 to 21, sacrificed their lives in Kilmainham jail. Today, as Donegal mentioned, our own John Gaffney, nephew of the John Gaffney we honour today, laid the wreath on behalf of the National Graves Association. There are many in today's political establishment who would have us forget these great people and the sacrifices they were prepared to make, and in so many cases did make. Of course, this should not surprise us. Any comparison between some of the political leaders of today with the people we honour here today can only further disillusion an already disillusioned and angry populace. The people we commemorate here today were motivated by the noblest of principles, not by pay. They fought for freedom, not for expenses. They struggled for justice, not for allowances. And they died for the sovereignty of their country, not for pensions. The people we commemorate here today were motivated by the purest of ideals, and their commitment to those ideals was total. Efforts to obliterate the injustices inflicted upon Republican volunteers during the Civil War commenced early. In 1932, the then Minister for Justice, Desmond Fitzgerald, wrote to his officials instructing them to destroy records relating to all of the executions. But today, many people have already forgotten or are unaware of the sacrifices these people made and the brutality and injustice that was so often inflicted upon them. Huge levels of commitment and self-sacrifice were displayed by these Republican men and women and those who preceded them, and indeed those who succeeded them down through the generations. In the pre-dawn hours of March 14, 1923, 4 Republican volunteers lay in separate cells in Drumbo Castle in County Donegal, awaiting their imminent executions. There were 3 men from Kerry and 1 from Derry: Commandant Charlie Dawley, Brigadier Sean Larkin, Lieutenant Daniel Enright and Lieutenant Timothy Sullivan. That morning at 6 a.m, they were each brought a piece of paper. On that piece of paper was a pledge not to again take up arms against the Free State. They were told, sign this piece of paper and go home to your family. Refuse to sign it and you'll be executed. Shortly after dawn, a little over 2 hours later, all 4 men were executed. All 4 had refused to simply sign that piece of paper. The same thing happened to other volunteers during this period who were executed by the Free State. 77 such volunteers were formally executed, which is the Roll of Honour that Paddy has just read out. A further 124 or so were informally executed. That is, they were done to death, often with great brutality, while in the custody of forces of the state. Men such as Sligo's Noble Six, the 18 men in Kerry who were brutally assaulted and then tied to landmines and blown to pieces, and Noel Lamass, whose torture was described by the then coroner Dr. Brennan as, quote, something the most pitiless savage would be ashamed of. Of course, the injustice didn't end in the Civil War. Noel Lamass, Thomas Mackey, Henry McAtee and Joseph Bergen were all murdered after the war ended. In the 1920s, many former volunteers had to leave Ireland to seek work. Men who had fought in the 1916 rebellion, throughout the War of Independence, and who had taken the Republican side during the Civil War, had to leave their country because the state, its agents and supporters connived to deprive them of the most basic of rights, the right to work. We in the National Graves Association will never allow these great Irish men and women to be forgotten. We will continue to maintain their graves and their memorials, and through this work, their memory and their ideals. We recall the words of Mary McSweeney, who said that the acceptance or rejection of the treaty was not a matter of peace and war, but a matter of right or wrong. To support the treaty was, in her words, quote, to desert the principles of 1798, 1848 and 1916. She went on to say, I urge you to vote in the name of the dead and unite against this treaty, and let us take the consequences. The men and women we commemorate here today stood firm and took the consequences. They fought and died in battle. They were coldly executed and they were brutally murdered. They were tortured and imprisoned. They were excommunicated by their church and ostracized by the powerful and wealthy. But still they stood firm, and they faced and took all those consequences. And today we here remember them and we honour them. We also remember them because today they shine a light for a disillusioned and a disappointed populace. They teach us that if we hold on to our ideals and our aspirations, we can overcome political adversity and economic disappointment. When we see injustice, we can stand against it. And when we hear wrong, we can speak against it. Our ideals, our honesty, our beliefs and commitments have a value. So we can stand against injustice and we can speak against dishonesty. Our history is not a negative thing. It should be an inspiration, today more than ever. So today we proudly commemorate the men and women who fought and died for the Republic during the Civil War, and we thank you all for coming here today to join us on this, the 90th anniversary of the first executions. Before I finish today, I must mention two recently published books, written both compiled by Martin O'Dwyer from County Tipperary. The first of them, 77 of Mine, said Ireland, gives an account of each one of the volunteers executed during the Civil War. The second book, Death Before Dishonour, gives an account of 124 people who were murdered during the Civil War in what was commonly known as the Wayside Murders. All of us should have both of those books, both to read initially and to keep as a reference material. So once again, Gura Míle and Gilf Galer for being here today. Thank you.